Hi there, welcome to our lesson. This is just an introductory lesson to Microsoft Excel. Hopefully I can teach you some of the basics of Excel and help you to practice in your own time. Microsoft Excel is a typical spreadsheet. Now you're probably wondering, what exactly is a spreadsheet? And a spreadsheet is just a program that allows you to use data in a number of ways. In other words, it allows you to forecast using data, it allows you to manage data, you can even do predictions based off your data, and more importantly, it allows you to present your data in a way, or present your information in a way, that your readers can find informative and interesting. So this is Microsoft's version of a spreadsheet, and we're going to do a few tasks today just to familiarize yourself with it. I quickly just want to mention that if you look up here, let me just turn this on, you'll notice that the user interface is very similar to what you saw for Microsoft Word. So for instance, you have a File tab, you've got a Home tab, Insert tab, Page Layout tab. So many of these things are very much similar to Microsoft Word. But you'll also notice that there are a couple of new additions and there are a couple of omissions. You have formulas, data, review, particularly formulas is a new thing. But it still comes down to this whole ethos that I want you to be familiar with. The fact that these programs all tend to follow a very similar design. So once you learn one, you should be able to familiarize yourself with the others. Alright, so let's look at Microsoft Excel. There are a couple of things that I just want to mention, a couple of things that I want you to be familiar with. This, for instance, here, you'll notice that you've got the alphabet up here, and you've got numbers running down on this side here, so running down on the y-axis, and on the x-axis you've got ABC. These ones actually signify columns. So for instance, this is the C column, so the C column goes down like this, right? Similarly, here's the E column, the F column, etc. And then on this side you've got the rows. So you'll see there's a row number 1 going this way, you've got a row number 9 going this way, etc. Now what's really interesting is what actually happens at the intersection. So for instance, if we look at here, this is the intersection between column C and row 9, so this is C9, right? And the C9 is called a cell. This is the cell C9. Let's turn this off again. Right? And you can also see that Excel will actually show you that this is C9. Similarly, here we've got E3, right? So there we can see that's E3. We've got G3, etc. And this is just showing you what or where the location of those specific cells are. And this is important because you can do things with the cells. You can actually write in the cells. Now there are different kinds of data inputs that you can put in. So for instance, you can put in numbers. So let's say, for instance, I write 90. So now I've got the number 90 in the cell of G3. I can even go a step further. I can actually write letters, so I can add a label. So for instance, I might say this is a budget. Okay, I can use this number, and I can even move this number from G3 all the way to B3. So now it's budget 90. So you can manipulate these cells to suit your own needs. Another thing you can also do is you can actually make these columns larger. So here I've got column A, and I've just made column A larger, I've made column B larger, and I've made column C smaller. You can do the same thing on the row side as well. You can make A bigger, A1 can be nice and big, you can make A2 nice and big, and then obviously B2 is also going to be quite nice and big. So all these different functions are there, all these different options for you to edit your spreadsheet. But let's do something more important. or something more interesting with Excel, and that is doing calculations. So let's say, for instance, we have a series of numbers, and I write in my numbers here. Okay, so I put in my numbers in the cells D2, D3, D4, and D5. Let's say I want to find out what is the sum of these numbers. Now I could use a calculator and I can calculate, or I can do it in my head, but you can actually do calculations in Excel, and this is one of the functions that Excel is quite good at as well. So one way to do this is that you have to specify, or you have to tell Excel that what you want to do is you want to do a calculation, and the one way you do that is to press the equal sign symbol. So now I'm telling Excel that what's going to follow is going to be a formula. In this case, I want to add D2 plus D13 plus D4 plus D5. So you'll notice there I've got my formula, equal sign D2 plus D3 plus D4 plus D5. When I press enter, I actually get these values added. Now there's another way to do this, and this is actually using the inbuilt function facility of Excel. I can write equal sign, and I can say that I want to use the sum function. I put it in my brackets, and I select the numbers that I want to add. Right? And it actually tells me what it wants to do in Excel. So it says equal sign the sum of D2 through D5. So it takes all the values from D2 all the way down to D5, and it's going to add them all up. And there we go. The value is 59. Now, similar to Word, you can also do some editing. So I can make the values bold. I can change the font of the values, or the font size of the values. I can even change what kind of font I have. Right, so all of these different options, or these different formatting options, are also available to you. I'm just going to undo that. So let's quickly do an example, or a class task. So let's say, for instance, I want to create a table showing a number of students and the grades they might have gotten for a test. So I'm going to label my table. I'm going to add a label, so that's students, and I'm going to say this is for test 1. I'm also going to have one for test 2. So theoretically there are 2 tests. I'm going to choose 5 students, and you can create your own students. You can create their own names as well. I'm just going to write in a few individuals here, and you can give them some marks. You can be generous. You can give them all high marks, but the whole purpose is that you have a couple of values that you can use. Right. So let's say, for instance, Jacob might have done poorly on his last test, but we add our values in. So what we have here is a very simple table, and we can edit this table. We can make it a bit nicer. So let's say, for instance, I want to edit this, and I want to make it sure to the reader that what they're looking at is a professional table. So I'm going to make an underlined line here. I'm going to change this. So one way I can do that is I can go here, and I add a border. So add a bottom border, right? I can even decide to make these numbers a little bit smaller, right? So I make that smaller, and I decide to put the numbers in the center. So now the alignment of these numbers are in the center. You can even choose that I want to make the names maybe a different font. And I can decide that I want this to stand out a little bit because these are the labels. I can even add a color for my cell. In this case I'm going to use gray. So now I can see I've got a tiny little, or a very professional looking um, a professional looking table here. Now one of the things I always want to do is, after a couple of students have written a test, is I want to find out what was the class test average. In this case, I'm going to use the average function. Now there's one way I could do it. I could do it manually. So for instance, I might say if I want to do it manually, it's going to be equal sign. I'm going to take the sum of all these values and then divide it by the number of instances. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. So there we have an average. But Excel actually provides you with the option to do this function almost automatically. So let's say, for instance, it's equal sign average, and I say that I want to take the average of the values going from B3 all the way through to B7. And there we go. So now I've calculated the average. I can do the same thing here as well. So I want to calculate what is the average for this test for all my students. And there we go, 52. I know that they've done a little bit worse on test 2 than in test 1. I can also work out the average for each of these students. So maybe Jacob would want to know what was his average on all the tests. Here we go. And I do the same thing. Equal sign average. And I select the values. There we go. So his average for the 2 tests is 40. There we go. Now this is a really neat trick as well that I can quickly show you. Let me just do it again. So let's say I want to do the average for all of them. So each one will be an individual average value. So here we've got for Tabu, for Sally, and for Ryan. I could write it out. I could write out equal sign average, etc. for each of those. Or alternatively, I use Excel. In this case, I can actually click on this little button here. You'll see my cursor is changing. It goes from the fat cross to a skinny arrowed cross, but right in the corner it becomes a tiny little black cross. If I hold it down and I move my mouse down, I can actually do the calculations almost automatically. And you can test it as well to see if it's actually correct. So there we go. And you can see this is the average for B4 all the way to C4. And this one's going to be B5 all the way to C5. And this one is going to be B6 all the way to C6. These are all the little tricks that you have available to you through Excel. Okay. Let's do another one quickly. Let's say we want to create a budget for ourselves. For our budget, we would like to find out what are our expenses based on some income. And there's different ways you can put this, but I'll just do this as an example. So let's say, for instance, my income is 20,000 Rand. Let's say my expenses are as follows. Well, I might have a cell phone contract. I might have DSTV. I might have the internet. I might have an education, an entertainment fund. I might pay food. I might have rent. And I might decide on having a clothing bill. These are just a couple of examples maybe. Maybe on my cell phone I pay 400 Rand. My DSTV is about 600 maybe. Internet I pay probably 900. Entertainment, this could be anything from going to the movies, etc. So let's say, for instance, I've got an entertainment fund of 1,200. My food for the month maybe, let's say it's 2,000. Rent is obviously going to be the biggest pay, or the biggest expense. And then maybe for clothing I have 1,000 Rand. So this is a simple budget. I'm just going to call it a simple budget. Right? I can change this because I want this to look a little bit different, because these are my labels. So I make them bold. I can even move this one down as well. Right? So you can even move these cells. and I might decide that this needs to be underlined. There's my 20,000, and this is my expenses. So I want to find out what's the total expense that I have for the month. In this example, I'm going to use my formula, equal sign, sum, and I choose the numbers, 400 all the way to 1,000. So my total expense is 14,100. Let me see if I can use this one here, just to show that's a sum. I can do this one as well. Let's change this one to this one as well. There we go. Now I might want to find out is how much money do I actually have after I've spent everything on my expenses. So I might say, what's my remainder? So I can have a new little column here called remainder. I can make this a little bit bigger. And for this one, I'm going to find out, based on my expenses, if I take off my expenses, I subtract it from my, based on my income, and I subtract it from my expenses, how much money do I have left over? There we go. So take the 20,000 minus the 14,100. Oops. Sorry. There we go. So what was the problem here? Well, in this example here, the value 20,000, because I'd written it as 20,000 with a space, Excel has assumed that this is text. And you can always make sure whether or not something is text as opposed to numbers by the fact that text always lies towards the left hand side and numbers always lies towards the right hand side. So in this case, it couldn't get the value because it thought that was text. Once I fixed it and I made it into a number, it could now do the calculation. So this is something you might want to look out for every once in a while. Alright, I think that ends our first video on Excel. So please use this video to practice some of the most basic elements of Excel. Alright, thank you.